Mr. Gandhi, it's a pleasure to welcome you at Atria University. Thank you so much for coming to the Interspecies Conclave. You flew all the way from Goa. Thank you again, sir. So, sir, you wear multiple hats: filmmaker, entrepreneur, media producer, innovator, and even event systems researcher. So, before we kind of dig into the technical questions of your viewpoints about the interspecies movement and other areas, I would love to know about your journey. How did it all begin? Did you always want to be in films, or did you have multiple interests? You started differently. So, if you can talk a little bit about your journey, that will be lovely.
No, I still have different ambitions and aspirations. I still wake up every morning thinking that I'll grow up and become a scientist someday. So I still have that notion of wanting to participate in life in uh, through through different paths, through different journeys, and that's something that um, I've been fortunate to keep alive in me. Um, as a child, I was extremely curious and was gifted with an environment. My mother and my grandmother, by environment I mean my mother and my grandmother, who were extremely encouraging of that curiosity, were facilitating of that curiosity, and that inquiry was never oppressed or suppressed. So so that allowed me to think vast without without ever imagining that there are that imagining that there is uh, there is a mainstream way of thinking that ought to be followed. I never had that pressure, so that allowed me to keep imagining that I want to participate in understanding where we are at. Like, really, as a child, all of us ask those fundamental questions. I um, I I once went to my philosophy teacher and I gave him a bunch of questions scribbled on a small piece of paper. Um, a few days later, I saw that all his PhD students had photocopies of that little sheet of paper. So I felt very proud. I went up to him and I said, "Isn't that amazing that you feel that? Isn't that amazing that a young person, uh, your youngest student has scribbled a bunch of questions and you feel that they are academically of value to your PhD students?" And he said, "Well, philosophical questions are questions raised by children that scholars fail to answer."
Wow.
So those are the questions that I stayed very committed to my entire life, and the answers always came from surprising places. For the longest time, I sought answers where everyone else seeks them, which are philosophical frameworks, spiritual frameworks. And if you are in this part of the world, you have access to very early access to a wide variety of spiritual frameworks and paradigms. So I sought answers there as a young person, but soon enough I started finding my answers in modern sciences, and I started finding answers about consciousness, about cognition, about human experience, about human journeys, about human histories, and potential human futures in from cognitive neurobiology, from evolutionary sciences, from systems sciences, and from chaos, and from all kinds of really wonderful sciences that were emerging as I was growing older. So that coincidence of my curiosity and the global scientific community also being curious about the same questions and finding answers around the same time became an extremely fortunate event for me. Um, that Now this journey, of course, informed the expression. So the expression and the inquiry ran parallel always. As the inquiry grew deeper, the expression became more articulate.
To ask you this since you are in films. So, why does mainstream cinema always shy away from picking up environmental subjects? I mean, to give a very simple example, uh, Elephant Whisperers recently won the Oscars for the best documentary, and after that, one expected that there would be a surge of producers and there would be a surge of writers and cinematographers who would want to talk about environmental related issues and subjects, and which is not the case. Is it because there's an assumption that it's always the commercial cinema which will do good for public interest, or it's just a lack of interest? So, if I would love to have your views on that.
Every human enterprise is consists largely of groups of people who are focused towards only short-term interest and low-hanging fruits. In case of storytelling, storytellers have, um, like a lot of other human enterprises, have not done their best, have not manifested their complete value, and have in some ways failed the society as well. In always trying to chase that low-hanging fruit, which is hacking into human behavior. We evolved as a species. We evolved in forest and savanna environments. We evolved in environments of great scarcity. Um, as a result, most of our stories evolved and had an evolutionary function. Stories are software upgrades to our genetic software, our behavioral software. Right? Stories are nothing but algorithms that we share with each other. These are formula that we share with each other, that if you are in such an environment, then do this, and that's perhaps going to lead to this outcome. So if you are engineering for this outcome, reverse engineer this outcome into these steps, and perhaps you will reach this outcome. So stories are simulations. Stories are a simulation engine for us to imagine different futures, different human futures, for us to reverse engineer these futures and invent the steps that would require to make dreams come true and ward nightmares off. So this is the responsibility of the storyteller, which has not been taken very seriously by a lot of storytellers. We have stayed we have stayed caged by primitive human behaviors and appealing to them, that evolved in times of profound scarcity, behaviors of conquest, behaviors of safeguarding yourself and your kin from the face of danger, behaviors of courtship. So all our stories talk about these stories. All our stories are essentially about these stories. Are about love, romance, sex, violence, conquest, revenge. So sex and violence, or love and conquest, are the two big themes that our stories have been caged by, and that is because these are behavior practices and behavior upgrades even, that the human mind is designed to reward through natural selection. Natural selection has rewards participation in a story that is going to give you new tools, new hacks to court, to find meeting partners and retain them better, and to safeguarding yourself in the face of danger. Hence chase sequence. Like there is a Hollywood page 66 phenomenon, which is like at page 66 you ought to have a chase sequence, which is so primitive to most human behavior. So there are these hacks that storytellers collected and shared over the. If you look at any storyteller talking about storytelling, what they're essentially sharing with each other are hacks, are ways of hacking into large scale public behavior, so that they can stay engaged and they can stay addicted to that stories. So these are empty shells without any. These are like, peacock feathers. It's like an evolutionary paradox of sorts that storytelling has gone in the direction of. It's the storytellers keep repeating recipes of stimuli that cause very specifically engineered behaviors of addiction in audiences. And you can keep repeating that over and over again.
It's a pattern. It becomes a pattern eventually.
It is always a pattern. It's a behavioral, it's a biological pattern. So that's where storytelling has failed really. Storytellers ought to have done something else. Some storytellers do that and have done that, and hence we are even having this discourse, because we have also learned from stories that people have told well. Storytellers ought to reprioritize our storytellers need to help us prioritize our acute and chronic problems. Storytellers need to help us simulate nightmare situations and dream situations for humanity. Storytellers need to help us create all kinds of simulations of how these will play out and how to avoid them, or how to make them happen. And by that I mean storytellers ought to have made 1,000 stories about pandemic before the pandemic came about. So we should have invested in that, and imagine the amount of human wealth and human suffering we could alleviate, and human wealth we could have saved. So had we told the right stories over a long period of time, had we speculated what were to happen if a pandemic were to, if an outcome like pandemic were to happen, what could have happened, what could happen. Imagine if there were 1,000 films like Contagion out there, right? There are 1,000 love stories, there are a million love stories, there are a million stories about conquest and revenge and whatnot, which are not the most urgent challenges that we've.
Apocalypse, in my opinion, like it's all blood boxes, and I don't know, the last train to Busan, whatever. But
Well, Well, zombie stories are fascinating because if anything, zombie stories have created some public consciousness around pandemic. Uh, the CDC, from the little I know from Larry Brilliant, the CDC has even financed some zombie films in the past, and that is because that's a good metaphor to engage public discourse around potential pandemic and potential outcomes of pandemic. So I think sometimes metaphors are fine, and you use allegories to become bridges. But overall, the intention and the direction of storytelling ought to be more focused towards creating better human futures.
Thank you so much, sir. So now your work is all about emotions and thoughts and expressions. Now, today when we think about uh, technology and wildlife, now there's another um, uh, movement which people are calling it interspecies communication, where scientists are using AI to talk to animals. Now, the question which I would love to understand from you is, where do you think is the ethical bit of this segment? What I mean is, let me simplify it for you. Today, scientists are using AI to talk to animals. And the blue whale that I'm trying to talk to may not be interested to talk to me. So, do you think we are crossing the red line for the sake of innovation in our own technology, or is it perfectly fine to, or there is no unethical angle to it for us to experiment with animals via AI and keep innovating our technology?
I'll have to unpack that question quite a bit because there are a couple of things about that question that I'm not so sure if I fully grasp. One is, I don't think my work is about emotions. Emotions, e- the emotions provide one of the many dictionaries. It's one of the vocabularies that my work deploys, my work uses, to to be presented, to be created. But my work, like it ought to be, is about systems. Is a system scale meditation and speculation and simulation. So it's made up of emotions, it's made up of feelings, it's made up of ideas, it's made up of concepts, it's made up of images, it's made of entire systems of simulations and memetics and semiotics. It's made up of history. It's made up of, so it's a sum total of a wide variety of human enterprises, not just human emotional expression or human feelings expression. That's like the first thing that is important to register, because that feeds into the second part of the question that you're building, which is, I don't think that there is any negotiation about uh, imposing ourselves on other species. If anything, I think the conversation is now coming from a caution towards what's likely to happen. Our AI models, because they are in intimate proximity with one species, which is the human species on this planet, and their interaction, or their AI, which is a very intelligent, which is an exponentially intelligent being that we have in front of us now for the first time in history of this planet. Perhaps we have, and definitely the first time in the history of humanity, we do have an entity that's smarter than us. We do have an entity that's more knowledgeable than us, and soon enough, possibly more powerful than us as a species. Now, and I say this uh, without any value pre-attached to it. I'm saying this as a fact, that this is the fact that we're looking at. I'm not attaching value to it yet. Uh, Now we can start attaching value to it. Now we can start saying, okay, what is it that we want to do from here? Where do we want to go from here? We uh, we 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 sometimes make the error, I think, of pre-attaching value uh, to frameworks and to propositions without knowing where these values are coming from. Are they coming from this network effect of our intuition? Because that can be right or wrong. What is right and wrong? It is values of right and wrong, values of ethical values, values of our morality are to be reverse engineered from the future we seek and agree to build. So what kind of future are we looking at building? because values cannot be inherited. There is no teleological value. There is no value to be inherited from 3 billion years ago. And in fact, there is no value. There is we have to be very careful about the values we are inheriting from nature as well, because nature is inherently violent. Right? We literally have a phrase for it. We call it Jungle Raj. So the idea of Jungle Raj is that with the exception of photosynthesizing species and with the exception of chemosynthesizing species, every individual of every species lives by murdering something every day.
Survival of the fittest.
That's an easy way of putting it. But what I'm trying to say is that every individual's member of every species kills someone or something every day, right? So what is it that we are trying to do as a species then? What we are trying to do in our project of civilization essentially is that we are trying to rectify upon nature. We are not actually going back to nature. We want to rectify this property of being natural. The property of being natural is to be predatory. Suffering and misery are inherent parts of nature. One species eats and the other species dies on a daily basis, on a minute-to-minute basis, right? The beautiful sounds of nature are species telling each other where to hunt and who to kill, essentially, and calling for sex as well. So what we are trying to do as a species, as humanity, is that we are trying to arrive at a future where we can reduce predation, where we can reduce suffering, where we can reduce the overall misery on this planet. And we have tools to do that increasingly. So when we are training AI, we have to give it directionality. AI can do a lot of things for us and can perhaps do things better than us. But we have to make the choice for it. We have to decide the future we want to go towards. Do we want to go to a future where we really just burn this planet down and live in this party mode, and that party mode is also for like a 500 million people, and the rest of the planet is in misery and suffering while we are at it? Or do we want to create a sustainable planet, which is a long-term, never-ending life, hopefully till something out of our control comes? Do we want to create longevity of life on this planet? Do we want to create human longevity on this planet? If that's the answer, if the latter is the answer, what will it take to do that? What will it take to create a system of equity, a system of equality, a system where everyone has equal opportunity to dignity and life and sustenance? What would it take to do that? That's really the question we are trying to answer now. And in the spirit of doing that, we have to train AI to help us do that in every way possible, which of course will include our systemizing our empathy, systemizing our relationships with non-human animals. So now coming to the last part of your question, which is what is it that we are training AI, or what we are expecting AI to do with the interspecies communication? It's not that we're trying to impose ourselves upon non-human animals. It is that we are concerned that AI being based on large language models today, and hence its proximity to animals it's not proximate to animals. Its proximity to animals is via human and human experience, and that to capitalist human experience of factory farming, etc. It's going to be modeled towards even a deeper anthropocentric view than ours, which may be problematic for us, us in the long term. Forget the pain and the suffering it will cause to our non-human co-inhabitants. So that's really the conversation here. The conversation is that can we create a framework of communication through which we understand the other stakeholders that are non-human on this planet as well. Yeah.
Sir, thank you so much for your response. Now, my final question is about the university. Now, at Atria, sir, we specialize in interdisciplinary STEM learning, where we are teaching our students to not look at a problem from one lens, but problem solving in multiple lenses. Because I think in today's DNA and age, I think, as we say, modern problems need modern solutions, where we have to teach students how to look at one problem, not just in one dimension, but in several dimensions, because these eventually form into jargons like teamwork and collaboration, which is important for an industry. Now, do you think that universities, the likes of Atria, which are influencing young minds, and teaching them uh, real world problem scenario via a very practical lens as well make any difference or make any contribution in movements like the interspecies or climate change, for example, which again, because a few years down the line, this is the same crowd which will join hands and maybe bolster such movements for the greater good, might I say. So, what do you think of that?
I mean, the answer is embedded in the question. Enabling young minds to participate in better good. That's really what education is for. The again, the social function of education as an instrument in our society and in the civilization is to enable individuals to be able to sustain themselves and their loved ones, and do that, carry that enterprise out sustainably for everyone else. That's really all there is to it. And uh, so it's not only important, it's urgent, it's extremely necessary. And I'm a huge believer in gamification today. Games are a language that are game as a language is a is synonymous with all biological interaction. There is at the level of from cells to from cell biology to interspecies biology, from predator prey relationships to tritophic relationships to all kinds of relationships we have studied in nature, uh, are are games, are and nature in a way has gamified these interactions. Um, the infants, the children of every species plays, engages in games. Cubs play, kittens play, puppies play, babies of spiders engage in play as well. So the reason they do that is because play is natural pedagogy, play is natural education. Play is nature's way of creating a system where it the rewards young ones to simulate the actions that they will have to carry out in the real environment, in a safe environment. So in a safe environment with their kin, they come together and they punch and pull and hide and seek and strategize and carry out all kinds of actions that they ought to be carrying out in the real world when they when they grow up. Using this language of biology and applying it on modern problems, far more complex problems, systems problems, climate change, pandemic, wealth redistribution, hunger, applying the language of biology on modern systems, on modern problems, on modern challenges and future challenges is very important in education. So that's what I believe in very strongly, and that's something that we attempt to do at our studio constantly, which is basically how do you transmit insights on some of these ideas on AI ethics and responsibility, or on future of policy or future of humanity. How do you take some of these very complex conversations but make them as thrilling as PUBG or Counter Strike? How do we make them as exciting and thrilling as shooting your enemy and hiding yourself from the face of danger? How do you make it as adrenaline pumping as any of these primitive experiences are?
Great, thank you so much, sir. My absolute privilege to speak to you, in this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.